This is the second tier manager rankings for the 2025-26 season. We're revealing our bottom 12 today and then our top 12 tomorrow. The way we make these rankings is pretty simple. Justin and I each make our separate lists and then we merge them together based on the average position of each manager. As we go through, I'll give you an idea of where we had each manager. A lot of them we had in similar positions. There were a fair few which we were miles apart on. So it could get a bit spicy over these two episodes. And just one final thing before we start, and this is a really important point. These rankings are based on how much we would want each manager in charge of our club. That's a really crucial thing we need to emphasise at the start of this, because that's the only way we can properly compare your Will Stills to your Gary Rowett's, isn't it, Justin?
Yeah, this is not how good they are, because that's obviously the varying degrees of success of each manager. This is who we want in charge of our hypothetical club. We know we support Derby. You all know this by now. But it's not who we want in charge of Derby. It's a hypothetical club. Let's just sit on that for a second, digest it, and then do not allow it to fill you with frustration as we go through this list.
Without further ado then, let's get into it. Let's start with number 24. Justin, who is the manager who we have bottom of our manager rankings for the 2025-26 season?
We have Phil Parkinson of Wrexham. Now, I think before we discuss Phil Parkinson, you have to praise what he's done for Wrexham since he joined the club when they were in non-league. Not only leading them up the leagues, but being a leader and spokesperson, very humble, very gracious. But, this is a big but, and it's a very important one. As far as championship pedigree goes, he has struggled. There's no denying his capability in League 1 and 2. You've got to go back to his days at Colchester in the mid-2000s, then obviously Bradford, massively successful at Bradford, and obviously Bolton. But in the second tier, the numbers are just not comfortable reading. Overseen 141 games, lost 78, won just 26. It's worth bearing in mind that none of those teams had the resources that Wrexham do, but there is probably a debate to be had about the strengths of those squads he had at his disposal. Bolton, Hull. Is it better than Wrexham's now? Maybe. But yeah, Phil Parkinson is bottom. Championship background has not been great.
Yeah, look, Phil Parkinson is a Wrexham legend. Understandably so as well, because he's guided them to back-to-back promotions. That's always a very good way to endear yourself to supporters, and he's clearly no slouch. But financially, Wrexham should have been winning promotion. It would have been a failure if they didn't, because they had by far the biggest budget in every promotion season, bar last year because of Birmingham City, of course. It's worth remembering they didn't actually win the league in either of their last two seasons either, despite their budget. In terms of the underlying data, Wrexham weren't exactly dominant in League One last year. They were actually more like a playoff chasing side. And as you say, Justin, Parkinson's championship record isn't great. His most recent spell was with Bolton, who were relegated in 2019. And then you've got to go back over 15 years for the last time he was at this level. So he's traditionally more of a lower league manager. Simply put, if a championship job came up and Phil Parkinson was a free agent, would he get that job? No chance in a million years. When he took over at Wrexham, he was a League One manager batting below his level. Now he's above that level. So I personally would be stunned if he is still the Wrexham manager come the end of the season because of their ambitions, which we all know. I think the next chapter in this Wrexham story sees them getting a big name as manager to take them to that next level, because I don't think Phil Parkinson's going to be able to do that.
Well, I think that's it. It's about taking Wrexham to the next level. And I think being in Wrexham's position with their income, their financial resource, I think being relegated wouldn't be a disaster, but there's a clear plan in place for this club to go as high as it possibly can do. And to fall at the first hurdle would be a massive, massive setback. Just quickly on Parkinson again, he has mastered promotion from League One, but it's finding that formula that works in the Championship for him, and it's not been the case. It is also worth bearing in mind that the things were adapted in League One, so he has shown that he can adapt his Wrexham team to the league they're in. His team became less expansive. They scored less home goals last season than they did the previous year in League Two. Became a lower block. slightly more direct, use target men really well, the likes of Ollie Palmer, Jay Rodriguez, and obviously Stephen Fletcher. But is that enough in the Championship? I don't think it is. I think you need someone who's a little bit more tactically astute. You can argue the same thing about Paul Warne, because I think they both, Phil Parkinson and Paul Warne, fill a similar category of being very good lower leagues.
Progressive is the word I would use, Justin.
Yeah, they fill a very good sort of lower league manager in the EFL, but can't really quite cut it at Championship level.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on with everything you say there. Let's go to the manager, who we've got 23rd and second bottom in our manager rankings. It is Hull City's Sergei Yakirovich. Now, the main difficulty with doing this list each year is we always have new managers who have never managed in this country before. That's always going to count against them, because with this being based on how much we would want each manager at our club, we would prefer someone who we'd know what we're getting with them. Now, if said manager has an exciting CV behind them, we can almost overlook the unknowns about them. Unfortunately for Sergei Yakirovich, 5 months in the Turkish league, preceded by spells in Croatia, Bosnia and Slovenia, it's not an exciting CV. For full disclosure, he did a good job at his last club, Kayserispor. He kept them up despite not making a single signing last season. He also won the Croatian league with Dinamo Zagreb. Now, he may end up being a success. We just don't know. But out of all the managers new to the league from abroad this season, he's definitely the least convincing based on his CV. Add in the fact Hull's ownership and their record with managers from abroad is utterly abysmal. And Yakirovich is having to deal with issues off the pitch as well as on it, Justin. There's not a lot going in this guy's favour for Hull City.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, there is very little we know about Yakirovich. He was an unknown, and I mean, we saw several managers linked with the Hull job. It's probably not doing it much of a justice, really. The likes of Mick Beale, Albert Riera, Emre, they were all linked heavily with the job at Hull before Yakirovich was hired. And to go on his record, he does have a healthy record. Hull fans will want us to talk about his win percentage being at 58.9 across 4 different countries. But when you look at the standard of those leagues compared to the Championship, I don't think they quite cut it. It's mostly across the Balkans. Maribor in Slovenia, that was a 10-team league. Gorica in Zagreb and Rijeka in Croatia, 10-team leagues. Mostar in Bosnia. So how transferable is that to the Championship? I don't think it is. You'd need a larger sample size from Kayserispor to really, really be convinced that Yakirovich has the ability to adapt and step up to the level that is a Championship. Now, I'm not saying the Championship is the Premier League, but it's a very difficult league to navigate. And I think some good spells in Croatia and a very small but good spell in Turkey isn't enough to convince me to put him ahead of other managers, unfortunately. Yeah,
and it says a lot, really, that he was pretty much an unknown in the Turkish league, wasn't he? So now that he's coming over to, the Championship, yeah, he's got a lot on his hands. And kind of a quick diversion on that is the news that Hull, who were recently put under a transfer restriction banning them from paying fees for players for the next 3 windows, concern growing about their future and the club's finances. The Athletic have now revealed that at the end of May, Hull had future commitments of almost £22 million to pay to clubs as part of transfer agreements. 22 million, blooming heck. Yeah, they've allegedly approached several clubs and requested to delay transfer payments. They're said to owe a debt of close to £3 million to former owner Ehab Allam, and some suppliers have been forced to pursue the club for outstanding money. So yeah, they apparently owe a lot of people money, Justin. I think they actually owe me a couple of £100. But yeah, what do you make of all this?
How is their transfer strategy Klarna? What is going on here? I know clubs will spread payments, but that is an outrageous methodology, isn't it? Especially across that much money. But it's doing is it's putting pressure on Yakirovich, because obviously there was talk of a top 10 finish, aiming for a top 10 finish. That's a very difficult thing to foresee in amongst the issues that Hull have. The lack of accountability and ownership of these problems as well by Atronilla Charlie is problematic. I think you need to come out and say, we're working to resolve it, rather than, hit back at quote unquote fake news, as he put it. I think that's a problem. But I think Hull need, I wouldn't say new ownership, but they need new vision, because what they've got at the moment hasn't been working for a few years. It's now put them into a financial state, to say the very least, which you don't need when you're trying to stay in the Championship.
Yeah, very, very worrying times at Hull City. But let's get back onto the topic at hand, and it's the manager rankings, Justin. This is 22nd in our list and third from bottom. Who have we got here?
We've got Paolo Pezzolano of Watford. Now, I am incredibly intrigued by Pezzolano. He's known as a promotion specialist. He's been promoted in Spain, Brazil, Uruguay, so the pressure is on him. But him being low in this list probably comes down to him being an unknown from overseas. It's as simple as that. Style of play-wise, he wants to play a high defensive line. He wants to regain possession quickly. But that being said, I'm seeing a lot of managers say they want to do the same thing, especially in new managers. Jurkovic was the same. I think the thing that dulls my excitement about Pezzolano is Watford. That's a big thing. Their track record of managerial appointments is very scattergunny, isn't it? He's been given a 1-year contract as well, with an option to extend. So are Watford really convinced? This is my very big take right now, is unless he performs an actual miracle where Watford excel in cup competitions and they win promotion as well, I think he'll be out the door. Whether they win promotion or not, I don't think he will be at Watford this time next year.
This is Watford. I'm not sure that is that big a claim.
But I know, but it's crazy. But he's just been appointed. You'd expect him, especially on the back of a 1 year with an option to extend, that Watford will take that up. But I think even if he delivers promotion, I don't think he'll be at Watford next season.
No, as I say, I don't think that's a big shout. But yeah, the 1 year contract is, I think it says a lot. For me, it's really quite difficult to see why Watford went to the trouble of sacking a popular, young and talented manager in Tom Cleverley to get this guy in. He might end up being a good manager, but his CV doesn't exactly blow you away. He's managed in Uruguay, Mexico, the Brazilian second tier, and most recently in Spain. He hadn't actually managed in Europe until 2 years ago. He went to Real Valladolid and got them promoted from the Spanish second tier, although it was on the highest budget in the division. And then they got battered every week in La Liga before he was finally sacked last December. Ultimately, I don't know what level the Mexican League is compared to the Championship, but he didn't do amazingly there. In La Liga, he was a disaster. In the second tier of leagues, he's done very well in Brazil and in Spain. But the Championship is the best second tier in the world. Simple as that. Much further ahead of Spain than most realise, particularly in terms of the amount of money being spent there. So, as I say, quite strange to say this guy is an upgrade on the previous manager. And when the owners sacked Cleverley, they said it's because they want to be competing for the playoffs. So if this guy doesn't have them doing that, he's not going to last long, especially at Watford, Justin.
It's the Watford pressure, isn't it? I think it's worth pointing out that I am, like I said, I am very intrigued by it. But I think if it goes well, I think it will go very well for Watford. I'm not saying they'll win promotion, because I think their squad's a lot weaker than a lot of teams. That might get addressed as the transfer window progresses. But I think Watford's thinking here is they've gone for a promotion specialist, and I don't think you need to be a promotion specialist to, in Europe to be a promotion specialist. Does that make sense? He's got, he can plan for campaigns and he can plan for the pressures of competing for promotion and essentially getting clubs who want to be in the top flight and getting them there. And I think that sort of mindset is a good one. And I think Watford taking a bit of I wouldn't say a risk because it's Watford, but being very different in their thinking and not going for, I know they've gone for Chris Wilder already, but Chris Wilder would have been, he fits the blueprint of promotion specialist, doesn't he? He gets promotion in low leagues. He's been promoted from the Championship. They could have gone down that route, but they didn't. They hired from overseas, and they've gone for Pezzolano. The reason why he's so low for me is because he's new to it and we don't know enough about him. But that being said, are Watford convinced to give him a 3-year deal? No, they're not.
Yeah, it is worth remembering that Watford over the years have had a pretty good record when it comes to appointing managers from overseas. But, that was a long time ago. And this guy, based on his CV, doesn't stand out to me at all. It's annoying for me, really, and I imagine it's annoying for a fair few Watford fans that Pezzolano seems to be getting a fair bit of backing, which Tom Cleverley just simply didn't get last season. But there's a lot of pressure on him to deliver, that is for sure. Let's go to 21st in our manager rankings. It's Valérien Ismaël of Blackburn Rovers. We had him in a similar position, Justin, which, to be honest, I was rather surprised about. I thought you were a fan of his, so I was surprised when you had him this low in your rankings.
Yeah, the more time passes, the less I want him in charge of my team, which is sad, because if you are a long-time listener, you will know that I am a big Val advocate. I'm a Val advocate. I don't know where I was going with that, but you get the point.
I appreciate the effort, though.
But unfortunately, I've not seen anything anywhere near as successful as his Barnsley team. And the volatile form we saw last season at Blackburn is not enough to convince me that he should be higher. I think the standard of managers truly has grown in the Championship. It really has. And I think Valérien Ismaël, I wouldn't say he's being left behind by those managers that are around him. But I just, as time passes, I'm becoming less and less convinced by Big Val.
Yeah, when Blackburn got Ismaël in, I was neither underwhelmed or overwhelmed. I was just sort of whelmed. Of course, 4 or 5 years ago, he did a stunning job in charge of Barnsley. Since then, he didn't have a great time at West Brom, lasted 7 months at Besiktas, had a very unremarkable time at Watford, and then his brief time at Blackburn last season saw him nearly get sacked after 7 games and then suddenly go on a 6-game unbeaten run to kind of salvage his job and the season. So I don't really know with Ismaël. I think he's definitely a Championship level manager, but I struggle to see a team massively punching above their level with him in charge. Maybe he'll surprise us, Justin, but that's where I'm sat with him.
Well, out of Barnsley, West Brom, Watford and Blackburn, he's only seen one team punch above their weight, which is the Barnsley team.
In quite an extraordinary circumstance, in fairness to him.
Exactly.
But you look at what he's done since.
He's just reached par, hasn't he? And if I'm deciding to have a manager, an appointed manager, do I want a manager who's just going to continue to hit par? No, I want someone who's got history after history of overachieving and excelling way beyond their means. And unfortunately, we've not seen enough of Valérien Ismaël do that. Might well do that this season with Blackburn. Might be the case, and absolutely fair enough. I want that to happen because I like him. I like him a lot. He speaks very well. His style of football is different, and if it can click, it can be really fun to watch. But just haven't seen that since Barnsley, and that's a long time ago now.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Right, let's move on to the next one. And this is the first one in our list, Justin, where we had a bit of a discrepancy. There will be ones where we had far bigger, don't you worry about that. But you had this next one a fair bit lower than I did, Justin. But who have we got 20th in our manager rankings?
We've got Gerhard Struber, Bristol City. Yeah, full disclosure, I'm 22nd in my list, in my personal list. He's Bristol City's first foreign coach for almost 30 years. I think that's worth pointing out. So they really have gone left field with this appointment. It's not type, is it, for Bristol City to go overseas and get a manager? Fair play to them. They're thinking differently. He is, of course, the former Barnsley, New York Red Bulls, RB Salzburg and Cologne manager. But there are just too many question marks with Gerhard Struber. And again, maybe I'm falling too much on his Barnsley team as a measurable. His Barnsley team only stayed up because of Wigan going into administration. Despite having a really long chunk of time, results didn't really materialise that much. Cologne got rid of him with a couple of games to go. And we know what we're going to expect with him football-wise. He's going to deploy high press. He's going to play vertically. But ultimately, the last 2 jobs he's been removed from because he hasn't been performing to expectation. And again, if I'm going to have a manager at my club, I want them to overachieve. I want them to excel. I don't think Struber's done that.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm not banging the drum for him, shouting Gerhard Struber is going to take Bristol City into the Champions League by any means. That's not what I'm saying here. For me, the reason I rate him slightly higher than you is because I'm willing to sit back and give him a crack. Because, as you say, our only taste of Struber in the Championship so far was when he was at Barnsley, where he pulled off the great escape. As you say, he did have a bit of help along the way, but he pulled off the great escape. And he set the foundations for them to go on and finish in the playoffs the following season. Then he went to New York Red Bulls and then RB Salzburg. Didn't have a great time in Austria by any means. And then he spent last season at Cologne, which was a bit of an odd one. Towards the end of the season, them and Hamburg were both in the promotion places. Then Cologne had a bit of a wobble. Struber was sat with 2 games to go, but they ended up winning the title anyway. I think the main reason why I'm slightly more hot on him than you are, Justin, is because what I was saying a second ago, the Championship is the best second tier in the world, but Germany's is without a doubt the closest to it. And the other thing is, Cologne's underlying data last season was astonishing. They were easily the best team in the division. They should have won the league much more comfortably, but it looks as if putting away chances was a recurring problem, which I don't think Struber can really be blamed for. However, if he can inject that into Bristol City, they could be very good this season. So I think he's definitely more worthy of a chance than plenty of other managers this season.
I think the only thing I'll say to that is there probably was an expectation for Cologne to be promoted last season. And again, it's more to what I was saying about him, similar to Valérien Ismaël, really, about hitting par and just doing what is expected. Now, he didn't get to finish and get Cologne over the line, but I think with Bristol City, is there expectation to be a playoff team once again? Can Struber deliver that? And I think if Bristol City are going to be a playoff team, they're going to need to overachieve. I don't think, based on what we've seen at previous clubs with Struber, that he's capable of overachieving. I think they'll probably finish around 10th if he lasts the course of the season, and that will be that. It'll be very underwhelming. And I don't think that's enough, again, to convince me to put him in charge of my team, basically.
That's completely fair. There's a lot of question marks, but I think there's fewer question marks with certain other managers, put it that way. Let's go on to 19th, shall we, Justin? This is Ryan Mason of West Bromwich Albion. Now, it's obviously very difficult to really judge Ryan Mason as a manager because he's never been one. He's had a couple of spells at caretaker at Tottenham, which were pretty mixed, but otherwise we just don't know whether he'll be a success or not. All we can really go off is how highly rated he is as a coach, for which it seems like a lot. He was the youngest person to manage in the Premier League when he took charge of Spurs at the age of 29. You must be a bloody good coach if you're being trusted with managing a team like Spurs at that age, even if it was just temporarily. He spent 2 seasons as a first-team coach where I believe he was often leading the training, and then he was promoted to Ange Postecoglou's assistant for the past 2 seasons. So to have done all that before the age of 34 is impressive. So he definitely seems like he's well worth the risk. And look, I'm always banging the drum for young coaches to get a chance in management. There's so many success stories we've had in recent years from the EFL. Kieran McKenna, Danny Rule, Chris Davies, Steve Cooper, Enzo Maresca. There's also been a lot of coaches who have struggled to make that step up into management. You never know unless you get given a chance as a coach. And if it works out, you've got yourself a very talented coach for very little as a club. So why not? Ryan Mason looks like he's definitely worth the risk, even though, of course, we don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah, background's an important one here. But I think the reason why I would put him higher than some of the managers we've spoken about, like Ismaël and Struber and Parkinson, who have got a wealth of experience in management, is there's a potential element, but also the managers he's actually worked under at Spurs. He's worked under Jose Mourinho, Antonio Conte, very hands-on with Ange Postecoglou as well. I know the Postecoglou is an interesting one because of the experience, but Chris Davis has done very well working under Ange. And I'm not saying Ryan Mason will do the same thing, but there's clearly good coaching pedigree there. But there's a mix of styles as well. There's ultra disciplined in Jose Mourinho. Very conservative under Antonio Conte, but very expansive under Ange Postecoglou. And I think having that variety of styles that he's learned, in his coaching background, I think is going to really, really pay dividends. I think reading up on about him a lot as well, he's got a very player-focused approach. He wants to build a positive and supportive environment for players, and I think that probably stems from working very recently in sort of under 18s and academy football, transitioning that into first team. That's going to be important. And again, the experience as Tottenham interim isn't going to be massive, but it's going to pay him some dividends. I really like what West Brom are building as well. I think that's a positive. They are backing him in some sense. I'm excited by Ryan Mason, but again, to put him ahead of some managers would be unfair.
yeah, it would be a very much of a leap of faith in our behalf. And you forgot to mention Pochettino as well, Justin, obviously working with him as a player too. So, yeah, he's not had a bad few tutors over the years, has he? Mourinho, Pochettino, Conte, Postecoglou. So he's worked with some very, very good coaches at this very young stage in his coaching career. And now we get to see what he'll be like as a manager, because he's been one of those who has been linked with several manager jobs over the years. West Brom have finally taken a leap of faith and given him the chance. It'll be fascinating to see how he gets on, and who knows, it could be an absolute masterstroke on their behalf. Justin, we'll take a quick break, shall we? After that, we'll get on to the next 6 managers in our manager rankings. Welcome back to the second tier of podcast. This is the manager rankings for the 2025-26 season. And before we get on to the rest of the managers in this episode, may I take this opportunity to point everyone in the direction of the latest video on the second tier YouTube channel. I've ranked every home and away kit in the championship that's been released so far. I won't give much away, but it does include what I believe might be the worst shirt ever released by a championship club. Which one is it? There's only one way to find out. Second tier YouTube channel. Have a look right now. Let's get back onto the matter at hand, Justin. This is number 18 in our manager rankings. Who have we got here?
We've got Alan Sheehan of Swansea City. Now, if this was a ranking of who's the most handsome, Alan Sheehan would come top. Let's be honest.
Hang on, Rob Edwards.
There's debate in it. Maybe we have to have a separate episode. I would pick Alan Sheehan, but there we go.
There we go. That's another two-parter for us to do in the coming weeks.
Arguably, there'll be a very passionate debate as well. More to the football. This is what we're here for. It's Alan Sheehan's first, full-time job. He's had a lot of spells as interim coach at Swansea and done really, really well. And that's why I really push for him to get the permanent job at Swansea. But him, obviously, it being his first role, again, ranking him against other managers would be very, very difficult. That being said, Swansea have been very, very impressive under his leadership. They picked up 23 points out of a possible 36. That included a run of 5 consecutive wins last season. They're growing, and I think they're going in a... Caretaker managers always make me a little bit nervous because there's always a really, really short but very positive spell, and then it goes a bit wrong in the following season. I don't think that'll be the case with Swansea and Alan Sheehan, because I think Alan Sheehan is a very talented coach, and I think they will go and push higher on in the division. Tactically, he's very flexible as well. That's a big thing, and I think Swansea need to shake off somewhat that style and blueprint that they've had for a long time and mould it a little bit. And I think Alan Sheehan's the first man, should be the first man to oversee that. So yeah, I rate Alan Sheehan highly. Not high enough to put him higher in this list because you've got to compare him to other more experienced managers. But I think things will be very positive this year for Swansea, and I think Alan Sheehan will be very much higher next year if they're in the Championship.
Or if he's still in the job,
well, I don't want to be
probably
negative,
more questionable. But yeah, it's no surprise really that we've got Alan Sheehan right next to Ryan Mason, is it? Because they're in a pretty similar category, really, where we don't know with them yet. We've got a bit more proof in the pudding with Sheehan, obviously, having had the 13 games in charge of Swansea last season, where he did very well, going on a 5-game winning run at one point. It was at the end of the season where Swansea had nothing to play for. The pressure was off. But he seems like a highly rated coach, and he could turn out to be a brilliant manager. As I said with Mason, you never know unless you give these guys a chance. It's just too soon for us to justifiably put him ahead or put him higher than this right now. I won't be surprised if he does a good job at Swansea, but I also won't be too surprised if he's gone before Christmas. Yeah, I obviously hope it's the former, but these things often go one of two ways for assistant coach X stepping up to manager role for the first time. But will Alan Sheehan be benefiting soon from the support of none other than Snoop Doggy Dogg, Justin? The rapper helped launch Swansea's new home shirt, and there's been speculation he may be investing in the club in the near future. Justin, he took that kit and really dropped it like it's hot.
I don't know any Snoop Dogg references.
That's probably the only one I knew. You know that song, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
In the grooves in the hill, drop it like it's hot, drop it like it's hot. That one.
What was it again?
I'm not doing it again.
Perfect. Fair play. Obviously, Luka Modric, Snoop Dogg. I didn't know that would be an investing partnership. I never foresaw that.
How about that for a midfield partnership? That's something I would like to see. Let's move on, Justin, to manager 17 in our manager rankings. This is Paul Heckingbottom at Preston North End. Now, we had a bit of a difference of opinion here on this one. Justin had him a fair bit higher than me. I had him 20th. And the reason... Don't you what me? Let me explain. For me, I think it's more a case of me having managers ahead of him than me thinking Paul Heckingbottom is a bad manager. The way I see it is, if he was appointed at my club, I'd be pretty underwhelmed. And the reason why is this. At Preston last season, he had a bit of a stinker. He was sat relatively comfortably with them in mid-table in mid-February. And then he oversaw them win just one game in 15 and nearly provide the ultimate example of a team sleepwalking into relegation. But even though they stayed up, it was Preston's lowest league finish in 10 years. That's not all down to him. However, he has to take a large chunk of the blame for that late collapse in the season. Prior to Preston, he did a very good job at Sheffield United and getting them promoted. You could make a fair argument that they should have been getting promoted with the squad they had, but that's a debate for another day. Before that, his stock as a manager wasn't very high after 2 failed spells at Leeds and Hibs. So there's not a lot there for me to be excited about, hence why I wouldn't be excited if he was made manager of my club, and that's why I've got some of the more unknown quantities ahead of him in my list, because I'd rather take a punt on someone than Paul Heckingbottom.
Interesting. I have a couple of reasons why you might ranking so low, but I'll get onto those in a moment.
Okay.
More to the point as to why I had him as 13th is I rate
13th.
Paul
ladies and
Heckingbottom.
gents.
13th. I rate Paul Heckingbottom. I do. I think having a manager in charge that has won automatic promotion as recently as 2023, I think is a big thing. He finished in the playoffs the season before that too. After taking over from a nightmarish spell under Slavisa Jokanovic, he really had to recover the team at that point and re-identify what the Sheffield United squad was at the point he took over that year. And actually, I know he went on a poor run of 1 win in 15, but I actually think keeping Preston in Championship can be deemed somewhat of an achievement. I really do. I think he said himself, no, I didn't. I don't think he said himself that the squad needs a bomb throwing under it and starting again. And actually that identified how poor the squad actually probably is. You know, when you're relying on goals from Milutin Osmajic, an injury-prone Emil Rees, Will Keane, who again has poor injury record, and again your goalkeeper's Freddie Woodman, who had his fair share of stinkers last year, amongst others. I think it's problematic, and the squad does need starting again. And again, I think blaming him for their misgivings last year, I think is unfair because he didn't have a pre-season. He came in after one game. So this is his first full season. It's worth bearing in mind. It's his first full season.
I mean,
on a technicality.
I was nodding in agreement with most of what you were saying there, Justin, until you got onto Preston and saying it was actually an achievement keeping them up, because that's a take. I think Heckingbottom is a good indicator, really, of how Justin and I are at different ends of the spectrum when it comes to choosing managers. I like to take a chance with managers. I do. Justin doesn't. He needs solid evidence that a manager's going to do well, and that's going to be a running theme as we move further up this list. Justin mentioned that he had Heckingbottom 13th in his list. Wait until you see some of the managers he had below, because that's pretty interesting, Justin.
It probably is. Do you want me to tell you why I think you've got him so low in your list?
Go on then, I'm interested.
I think because he's got bum in his name.
Okay.
Heckingbottom.
Yes, thank you. I think we all got that.
And I think if his name was Paolo, you'd have him higher.
I'm not sure I would, because I think the alarm bells were well and truly ringing for me after the sleepwalking disaster that nearly happened at Preston last season. And Yes, he's not entirely to blame for that. As I said, there are other factors which could definitely be taken into account there. But any manager who oversees their team, one winning 15 and nearly getting relegated after being mid-table for most of the season, yeah, that they've got to take a lot of blame if, as far as I'm concerned anyway. Let's move on to one, Justin, who we had in a very similar position, and it's not going to go down well, I don't think, but go on, 16th, who have we got here?
Hold on, I just need to put my tin hat on and the Kevlar and everything else. It's Frank Lampard of Coventry City. I'm going to put this out there first. I think Coventry fans have an agenda with us thinking that we have an agenda against Lampard, as opposed to us actually having an agenda against Lampard. Okay. So they want to talk us. They want to talk about us hating on Lampard when that's not actually the case. We've been very fair with him.
Are we disproving that theory by putting him 16th?
Maybe. But I think firstly he did a job worth praising in getting Coventry into the top 6. But like a lot of managers, I think he's going into a full season where you can properly judge him. Because if you talk about resource, Coventry has been a well-financed team. It should have been going for top 6. It ended in top 6, albeit over a massive speed bump. That being said, finishing in top 6 last season, the threshold for the playoffs, I think, was much lower than it has been in previous years. That's both points total and what comes in reaching that points total, i.e. teams could afford to be inconsistent last season. But I think what was telling for me, and probably pushed him a little bit further down, was the playoffs and problem solving in the playoffs. You can praise Coventry for their approach in the semi-final, but the way they created chances, they just did the same thing over and over again, crossing the ball into the box. Law of averages was going to tell you at some point there was going to be a good chance and therefore a goal. But Frank Lampard didn't use Ellis Sims in this approach. He's arguably his best target man. And that's a problem. So I think there are several question marks that remain. And I think logically, if I didn't rate his appointment and ultimately he didn't achieve anything grossly magnificent, why would I rank him higher personally than I have done in previous years?
Yeah, I think you've explained your reasoning there, Justin, while also trying to kind of cushion any bullets which maybe come flying your way after this, and that's understandable. I'll be a bit more blunt about it, I guess. Everyone must surely know by now that we're not huge Frank Lampard fans. A lot of that is down to us being Derby fans. We saw firsthand he does have limitations as a manager. He took what I believe was a very talented team and scraped into the playoffs with them. By and large, with that team, the tactics seemed to be pass it to Mason Mount or Harry Wilson and they'll do the rest. Underlying data-wise, they were so poor. Then he went to Chelsea, which was a mixed one. He went to Everton, where he oversaw them go from top half team to relegation fighting side. And then he went back to Chelsea, where he did terribly. He won 5 points from a possible 27 with Chelsea. Not a relegation fighting side, it's flipping Chelsea. Now, at Coventry, I was getting pretty sick of the number of posts on social media from people who don't watch the Championship saying, what a job Frank Lampard is doing at Coventry. 3 things on that. Yes, they were 17th when he took over, but they were 10 points off the top 6 with 29 games to go. Secondly, they should have never been that low in the first place. It was undoubtedly a top 6 team at the very least. And also, they nearly messed up getting a playoff place. In the final few weeks of the season, they lost to Derby, Plymouth and Luton. They had to wait until the final day to tie everything up again. And they eventually did it against Middlesbrough side who had essentially, given up by that point, even though they still had a chance to get the playoffs. But another thing is, and you alluded to this just a second ago, Justin, everyone says Coventry dominated the playoff semis against Sunderland. Yes, they had a lot of the ball, but did they really create that much? All they seemed to do was repeatedly cross the ball into the box. So I still have a lot of reservations over Lampard, particularly on a tactical basis. I didn't see enough last season to change that. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, I've been very soft in my approach, but a lot of what you said was right. I think I will defend myself slightly. Being a Derby fan isn't a big reason as to why I don't rate Lampard. But his Derby spell is a reason why I don't rate Lampard. I don't think he particularly excelled. He achieved what the previous manager did, Gary Rowett, and getting scraping into the playoffs. And he did that. He did the same with Coventry. And again, if you're trying to pick a manager out, and again, yes, Coventry did sell Gyökeres and Gus Hamer for a lot of money. They've reinvested a lot of money back into the squad. So again,
a lot of money.
Is scraping into the playoffs enough? No. Is that Frank Lampard's fault? No, because they had a poor start. This is why this is an important year to actually understand as whether or not Frank Lampard is a good manager. This is the season that's going to define him, I think, as a coach. Because if he doesn't get Coventry into the playoffs, I think he's done. If he does get Coventry into the playoffs, then fair enough, he's achieved what we all expect Coventry to achieve. And anything above that is overachieving. So there's a lot here to judge Lampard off. I don't think last season is enough. Do I dislike him? No. Do I rate him as a manager? No. Simple.
Fair enough. I think that's fair enough. I mean, we were very critical of the appointment when it was made, Justin, and we were saying at the time that Coventry needed someone to take them to the next level that Mark Robins couldn't do. And we didn't think Frank Lampard was that man. And I would still be very, very, very surprised if he did turn out to be that man, because tactically, I just don't think he has it at that level. So we'll certainly find out soon, won't we? Well, we move on to the man who Frank Lampard replaced as Coventry manager, which I'm not sure is going to go down very well with Coventry fans either. In 15th, we've got Mark Robins, of course, now at Stoke City. Why is he higher than Frank Lampard, I hear you ask? Well, it's because Justin Peach had him significantly higher than me. In fact, this was the manager where we had the joint second biggest discrepancy in our separate lists. I had him 19th.
Whoa!
Hold on. And below Frank Lampard, for any Coventry fans who were wondering what's going on there. Justin had him 9th. A full 9 places ahead of Frank Lampard in his individual list. Incredible scenes. So you can take the lead on this one, Justin. Why did you have Mark Robins so high in your list still?
Because a bad start at Coventry doesn't push him down to one of the managers I'd least want in charge of my club. Simple. If Mark Robins was still available, I would still go for him now. It was a bad start last season at Cov, something we've seen time and time again. But I think if expectations were lower, I think he would have corrected the course and the team would have pushed at the table as they did under Lampard. I think that would have happened. It started to look like the tide was turning anyway, just didn't have enough time to do so. And then he goes to Stoke. I think he needed more time out, I'm not going to lie to you, but he's been fighting fires. The club is a fucking mess, right? He's trying to correct the mistakes that Jonathan Walters made in sacking Steven Schumacher, in recruiting so poorly, and then bringing in Narcis Palach. And I actually think Stoke, again, similar to Preston, in keeping Stoke in the Championship, despite having no momentum whatsoever at any point in the season, again, I think is an achievement. I think you can look at the data and criticise Mark Robins, but I just don't think he had good enough players at his disposal. I don't think he had a balanced squad that's needed to thrive. They're heavily reliant on loan players, especially forwards. They're not consistent enough. I think Mark Robins had a lot more problems than maybe people give him credit for last season. So that's why I still had him 9th. If he's available, I go for him. Absolutely.
It sounds a bit like Mark Robins' apologist in the way you were describing his Stoke spell there. But look, full credit. Mark Robins did an exceptional job at Coventry. That's something we've always said. Anyone who guides a club from League Two to the top end of the Championship deserves their flowers. He's undoubtedly a Coventry City legend. But his stock has taken an absolute battering over what was probably the worst season of his career as a manager, or at least in the last decade anyway. He, of course, got sacked by Coventry last November, with them sat 17th with one of the most expensive squads in the division. But perhaps more worryingly is how he got on at Stoke afterwards. Now, you mentioned everything there, Justin, about how there are definitely problems at Stoke. You're absolutely right there. He was coming in after a pretty woeful spell under Narcis Palach. And the reason why I have him ranked so lowly is because Stoke didn't really improve when he came in. In fact, in terms of the underlying data, they're actually worse than they were under Palach. They eventually managed to stay up, but were sort of just hovering above the bottom 3 under Robbins. Now, ultimately, I think Robbins has got a fair few questions to answer now, but the two that stand out the most to me are these. One, can he be a success at a club other than Coventry, where everything was kind of built around him? And two, can he be a success without his long-time assistant, Eddie Vivesh? Because it may not be a coincidence that everything's got a bit Pete Tong since those two fell out. And that's why I've got more question marks about Mark Robbins as a manager now than I ever have done in the past.
I think it's fair to have those question marks. I mean, even me having him ninth is a drop from where I had him last year, which was around the top. But that being said, I think you're being too harsh on him for the problems at Stoke. I don't think it comes down to Mark Robbins, because several managers before him had the same problems. I don't think it's a managerial issue. I think it's a structural issue at a club that, like I've said, is an absolute nightmare to be at. And again, I go back to that squad. He lost Tom Cannon in January, replaced him with Ali Al-Hamadi, which by all means is a replacement, but it's not someone with a lot of championship experience like Tom Cannon has, which is also very little. So again, where are your goals coming from at Stoke? Where's your creativity coming from at Stoke? I think Mark Robbins had a lot of problems last year, and I think you're judging him a little bit too harshly on that spell. I think that's a shame, because Mark Robbins has given us so many happy times, Ryan.
I'm not sure I am being too harsh. I will be revisiting this conversation in 2 managers' time, put it that way.
So will I.
Because I fully accept that a lot of the things you were saying there about Stoke being an absolute mess are valid, but when you look at how poor they were performance-wise, pre-Robbins and with Robbins, I think, there's a lot of questions there which give me concerns about him going forwards. Let's go on to manager number 14 in our managerial rankings. Who have we got here? Just in a bit of a new face.
We've got Julian Stéphan. Now, I think first off QPR, firstly, the reason why Stéphan is higher than Petzolano and Djurkovic, being new to the Championship, is simply because his track record is much clearer for us to be able to assess him. He's done it in leagues that are more assuring when it comes to transferring across to the Championship. I think as well as that, he's got a much better situation going on in terms of volatility at QPR than those other managers have at their respective clubs. He's got a very young squad to work with, and I think that's a big thing for me and why I've got him a little bit higher as well, simply because he's worked with some of the world's best players when they were younger. Rafinha at Barcelona, Eduardo Camavinga, Real Madrid, Jeremy Doku as well. He's worked with those players in France, which I think is a huge plus, and ultimately made those into, I don't even know what they went for signings wise, but he played a big role in their development. And if I'm putting a manager in charge, I want a manager who can get results, which is shown, but also develop players as well. And if you're a Championship club, you're going to need to sell them for a decent profit. And I think Julian Stéphan can do that.
Yeah, when it comes to making these rankings, I have a bit of trepidation, usually with managers coming from abroad who we simply don't know much about. But I think there's enough evidence here with Stéphan to be cautiously optimistic. For me, he's definitely the most exciting unknown quantity in terms of managers this season. I'm not counting Will Stillen out because he's not completely unknown. But for those who don't know, Stéphan's been managing in France for the past 7 years. He was firstly at Rennes, ended up guiding them to a 3rd place finish, their highest ever league finish in the club's history. He won their first trophy in 48 years, the Coupe de France, which is essentially the French equivalent of the FA Cup. And they beat Arsenal in the Europa League. Then things dropped off. He was sacked and went to Strasbourg, where he finished 6th, their highest league finish in over 40 years, despite 14 teams spending more than them that season, which is some achievement, really. Then things dropped off and he was sacked. He went back to Rennes again, where he started well, but couldn't replicate what he did the second time around. The common theme here is he does very well initially, and then things drop off. It may be exactly the same at QPR, but I think most fans would definitely take a successful first season and see where that takes them, because if that trend continues, this could be a very fun season ahead for QPR.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think a big onus on QPR is player development. And I know you're probably not going to unearth a Rafinha at QPR. That being said, Kwame Poku is a very exciting signing. Who knows where he can go?
Alongside Lamine Yamal sometime soon.
But if you've got a manager there who is, who does excel in that department, who is going to take risks with player selection and build young players into the first team, clubs like QPR need that. They need that because they simply don't have the catchment area to constantly, build players in from their academy. And in addition to that, their budget's not going to be as high as other teams around them. So they need a coach to come in who's going to excel and get more out of individuals. And Julian Stefan is definitely that, based on his track record, which is a lot more solid than other managers. I think the reason why, if anyone has any debate as to why he shouldn't be higher, because of his obvious success in France, is when you're a manager coming from overseas, success elsewhere doesn't guarantee success in the Championship because of how crazy the Championship actually is. I don't think people take for granted how much of a step that can be, culturally, but also physically as well. It's very demanding. Philip Cocu is a great example. Massive success with PSV in the Eredivisie. Went to Fenerbahce, didn't quite work out. Came to Derby, finished 10th in his first year, then lasted a handful of games in his second season, albeit with the impact of COVID. But there's a manager with a very good CV who struggled. That's why it's very difficult to put them very much higher than sort of mid-table.
Yeah, but as far as unknown managers coming into the Championship go, I can't recall many who have a better CV than this guy. Yeah. That's why it's really quite exciting to see how he gets on at QPR this season, but there is always that little doubt in your mind about how things may turn out. Let's go to one more in this episode of the Manager Rankings, Justin. This is number 13. It's Rob Edwards at Middlesbrough. This was another one where we had a big difference in our individual rankings. Justin had him much lower than me. So go on, Justin. Why did you have him so low in your list?
I need to be convinced by Rob Edwards. I really, really do. I think it's worth pointing out, I think he was let down last season at Luton because the recruitment was dreadful last summer, and that ultimately, paved the way for a disastrous season. But going to, last season for Edwards, he never found a formula that worked for the players he had. He would chop and change positions and personnel and still found zero solutions. I think he's very fortunate to get a job of the calibre of Middlesbrough and the potential squad that he's got at his disposal. Because I do think he perhaps should have settled for less. He has spoken openly about reflecting a lot on his time at Luton and why it went wrong, and ultimately he's convinced a very switched-on owner in Steve Gibson. But there's a pattern with Rob Edwards tactically that worries me a little bit, and it's the over-reliance on wide areas, specifically wing-backs. Alfie Doherty being injured last season for Luton was a big thing. Big thing. His Forest Green Rovers team had a lot of success in their approach play. That was in League Two. But you only have to look at the assist records of Nicky Cadden, the left wing back, and Kane Wilson, now at Derby, the right wing back, and see that he's got a clear philosophy. Didn't change it at Luton last season, did the same thing over and over again, got zero results for it. I worry about Rob Edwards a little bit. And like I said, I need to be convinced by him.
Okay. Disagree with a fair bit there, but I'll give you my take first before Justin and I have a little to do about it. I get that it's hard to be high on Rob Edwards after what happened last season, and his stock has obviously taken quite a bruising off the back of that. It was a bad season, and he's got to take a lot of blame for what happens. The way I look at it, though, is this. Was everything that went wrong at Luton down to him? No. There could have been loads of factors at play, and ultimately he left in January and they still went down. But prior to last season, he was so highly rated. He did an unbelievable job in getting Luton promoted. He took on what Nathan Jones did and took them to a new level. And then the Premier League, he did remarkably well. He had the team with the lowest budget in comparative terms in Premier League history, and he made them competitive. Yes, they ultimately got relegated, but they went down fighting, and they've actually won more points than any other newly promoted side to the Premier League in the past 2 seasons. He did such a good job that, be honest, Justin, would it have been much of a surprise 12 months ago if he did get another Premier League job? I don't think it would have been. So all of that has got to be remembered here for me. Yes, last season was atrocious, but it was the same for Mark Robins and Paul Heckingbottom, both of whom you had much further ahead than Rob Edwards in your ranking, Justin. But the difference is with him, for me, he showed he was capable of managing at the highest level not long ago at all. So with that being said, I had Rob Edwards a fair way higher than you did. And yes, his stock has taken a bit of a dive after last season. But I think we have to, if you look past that, then boy, oh boy, it's still a very talented manager there.
There might be, but like I said, I need to be convinced by it. I need a good season from him to be really, really, reeled in by him. I think when you mention him being capable of competing in the top flight, I think he was capable of putting out a competitive team, but ultimately Luton still got relegated. Now I know budget wise he's going to impact that, but come on, he still got relegated. He didn't guide them to safety. Very difficult thing to do in the Championship.
It was always going to be a miracle if they actually stayed up, Justin.
Yeah, but it can be achieved. It can be. I think that's so
he's getting punished for not being a miracle worker.
No, I'm suggesting that making a team competitive in the Premier League, I don't think is as big as an achievement as maybe you think. I just measure it differently. I'm just measuring it differently. And I think you're willing to give Rob Edwards the benefit of the doubt despite overseeing a team relegated. But with Mark Robins, because he was disappointing last season, you're willing to just push him to the side and push him lower down the list.
Yeah.
Why?
Because Rob Edwards has shown he can manage at the highest level, whereas Mark Robins has shown maybe on a tactical level that he is lacking somewhat compared to him, because Mark Robins ultimately, when it comes to the highest level that he's managed at, it's the Championship, and he's pulled off one playoff finish.
An FA Cup semi-final? Consistent top half finishes outperforming
It's knockout football though, Justin. I don't really take that into as high regard as league finish.
But Rob Edwards' achievement for Luton was getting them promoted, which was knockout football.
Yeah, but they also almost finished in the automatic places. If the season was slightly longer, they may have actually finished ahead of Sheffield United that season.
But they didn't. That's the half the point that I'm making. I think with Rob Edwards, I think maybe, like I am with Mark Robins, or like you suggest I am with Mark Robins, you're perhaps a bit of an apologist for Rob Edwards, and I'll happily accept that for Mark Robins, but I recognise a very talented coach in Mark Robins who has constantly adapted his teams with success, worth bearing in mind.
Rob Edwards has had more success than Mark Robins had.
He's had one promotion.
It's more promotions than Mark Robins has had from the Championship.
It is, but he's also overseen 2 relegations, which is more than Mark Robins.
Technically 1, because he wasn't in charge for the second half of last season.
Okay.
And Mark Robins nearly did last season when Stoke probably shouldn't have been, really. But yeah, I can get what you're saying, but for me, I just look at Rob Edwards and I think tactically he showed in that Luton team that got promoted from the Championship that he has that extra tactical edge over someone like a Mark Robins and even Paul Heckingbottom for that matter, because you look at how Paul Heckingbottom did in the Premier League, it was an absolute disaster, whereas Rob Edwards was able to stand up and make himself counted at the top level of world football. And yes, the budget, I think you're massively overplaying how small the budget was at Luton, because it was always going to be an uphill battle. In fact, it wasn't even an uphill battle. It was a mountain that they had to climb there to actually come close to staying up. And they nearly did, albeit with a bit of help from points deductions along the way. But they still finished higher than flipping Burnley did. And now Vincent Kompany's over at Bayern Munich. I'm not saying Rob Edwards should be managing Barcelona or anything like that, but he showed a tactical knowledge there that means he should be higher in your list at the very least, Justin.
I don't think he has shown a tactical knowledge because, as I said, I've seen a rinse and repeat with Rob Edwards. Like I said, the wing-back thing is a really important point to make. It's hard to judge him on his Watford spell, but very heavily reliant on wing-backs at Forest Green Rovers, very heavily reliant on wing-backs and supply from wide areas with Luton. There has not been much tactical variation from Rob Edwards. That might change with Adi Vivesh, because obviously Adi Vivesh oversaw a lot of tactical change with Mark Robins. Those poor starts to the season were remedied by formation changes at Coventry under Robins. Adriavesh may have been the spirit in that, we don't know. But I would look at Rob Edwards and I've not seen enough tactical capability there than what we have seen with other managers.
That's, in my mind, just wrong, simply put, but we'll leave it there. We'll agree to disagree, Justin, because I don't see how you can say that about a guy who has managed to take a team like Luton to a new level, get them promoted, and then get them competing in the Premier League, compared to a manager like a Mark Robins, who I don't know why we're suddenly comparing these two all of a sudden, considering there's several other managers included in this list. But yeah, that's what I'll say. We'll leave it there. But there we go. This has been eventful, hasn't it? Shall we do it all again tomorrow, ladies and gents? This has been part 1 of us ranking every manager in the Championship. Do you agree with us? Let us know your bottom 5 in the comments section if you're watching this on YouTube, or just get in contact with us, whichever way you want to. We'll be back again tomorrow with our top 12, so you don't have to wait very long, ladies and gents. Otherwise, this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.